So the movie kicks off with this weirdo named Shin, who's in a super messed up game where logging out is totally impossible, like death is literally on the line. He's fighting his way through all this chaos, and eventually faces off with the final boss, Gatekeeper Origin. Shin takes him down, thinking he's about to free all the other players. But surprise, surprise, the jerk can't log out. Just when he thinks he's free, a gate pops up behind him and blinds him out of nowhere. Fast forward 500 years, and our boy wakes up in a field, totally shocked to see his stats improved when he checks his window. Not bad, right? He wonders if beating the final boss had something to do with it, but then he calms down, thinking if he can just beat the game, he'll be able to log out. But let's be real, this loser can't even find the logout button. He checks for other players, but surprise again, nothing shows up because he's not connected to the network. He feels like the game's messing with him, but he can still move his limbs, so he's tripping out, wondering if this is really reality. He screams and rolls around like a total mess. Realizing he's not gonna figure anything out just chilling there, he uses this bird item magic to head home. On his way, he spots this huge wall and castle and is like, when did all of this get built? When he finally gets home though, he finds a couple of useless bullies harassing some girl because she won't spill the beans on where her master is. They try to take her away, but smack into a barrier instead, and freak out when they encounter this massive, ugly creature, and the loudmouths run off, leaving the girl right there. The big, scary monster tries to mess with her, but Shin leaps in and takes it down like a total champ, leaving it flopped on the ground like a headless chicken just as she's blinking her eyes open. The girl thanks him for saving her, and introduces herself as Tira Lucent. He introduces himself as Shin. Tira's curious if he knows her master since he mentioned her name earlier, but Shin's just lost. She's surprised he doesn't know her master, Schnee Razor, who's the shopkeeper of the Moon Sanctum. After thinking hard, the only Schnee Shin can think of is a lady who was one of his support characters. So he asks where her master is, but she won't tell him because they just met, and those thugs were after the same info. Tira mentions she can send a message to her master, since that's her job, but it'll cost 1,000 jewels. Right before the dollar sign lashes, Shin pulls out a gold jail coin from his magic item box and hands it over. Tira's like, how does a regular guy like you have something so valuable, only used by kings and fancy folks? To her, that gold jail is worth at least 10 billion jewels, but to Shin, it's basically pocket change. Tira's shocked and asks who he is, and he just plays it cool, saying he's just an ordinary adventurer and a high human at that. Tira drops the bomb that high humans went extinct during the Dusk of Prosperity, this big historical event from 500 years ago when tons of people just disappeared. So, yeah, the world's 500 years beyond the game's events. Shin thanks her, hands her the coin, and says he's looking forward to getting to know her. Tira, who's never seen wealth, can't believe he really wants to give it to her. She collects it, super excited to finally hold a gold jail coin she's dreamt of. Shin tells her it could really help her since elves do magic. He compliments her black hair, golden eyes, and beauty. But Tira is like, nah, it's just an illusion from my master to hide my identity. She goes on about how her black hair brings bad luck like monsters attacked her village all the time until she got kicked out. But her master rescued her and created the barrier, keeping her safe for 100 years. Shin figures it's because of the curse those losers were all about. He asks if there's a way to lift the curse, but she says not yet, her master is looking into it. She does admit she's okay living under the barrier, even if she can't leave it. When Shin asks if her hair has always been black, she says it used to be silver, but it changed one day when the curse hit her. Shin thinks about it for a sec, opens up his game window, and boom, sees she has a cursed gift, a random curse that changes her hair color and brings on the monster attacks. He tries to lift the curse with his powers, but only a bit of her hair turns back. Tira's thrilled to see her hair back to normal after a century. He tells her to try exiting the barrier, promising to handle any monsters that might appear. She's nervous, but brave enough to try. Nothing happens as they walk through the forest for a bit, and finally, with tears in her eyes, she feels so relieved to see the clear sky and experience the outdoors again. Tira thanks Shin, and he's stoked to help her out. And she mentions that her master won't be back for a while, and asks what he plans to do now. Shin's like, I want to check out a nearby town. He's super curious about the world and wants to see if his other support characters are out there since Schnee is alive and well. Tira remembers a place called Bayrelift Kingdom, which she thinks he should check out. She gives him a letter of introduction to help him bypass inspections. Shin's surprised she'd give him something like that so soon after meeting, but she says he deserves it for lifting her curse, and he seems cool and trustworthy. After a bit, Tira promises to let him know when her master returns, and he heads off to Bayrelift Kingdom. When he gets there, he's lucky enough to skip the long line thanks to that letter. A random dude tells him that the letter is basically his id to get an audience with the king, so he better hang on to it. This dude takes him to the Adventurers Guild, and then bounces. Shin thinks it'll be a solid place to get info, so he walks in. He meets the guild's attendant and tells her he wants to register as an adventurer, She points him in the direction of where to apply. When he gets there, he meets a girl who looks just like the first attendant. Turns out she's Silica, the older twin sister, and the first girl was named Celica. Shin pays the registration fee and fills out the paperwork for his guild card, which takes pretty much all day. And next scene, we see Shin chilling in the guild restaurant waiting for his food. He checks out the armor of other customers, realizing it's all lower quality than what he's used to in-game. A bit later, the old pervy Celica serves him his food, and he's shocked to find her in the kitchen. She claims she helps out when she's not busy. Shin digs into the food, and it actually tastes good. Then Celica leans in and whispers that she heard he has a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Shin nods, and she asks if she can verify it. He tells her to wait until he finishes eating. Just then, a muscular dude with a 2-mark face bursts onto the scene, introducing himself as Barlux Heim, the guildmaster. In a private room, Barlux is all about checking if the letter is the real deal. He lines up another letter of introduction next to Shin's, and those cards start glowing, confirming it's legit. Shin mentions Tira gave him the letter, and the guildmaster shares some things Tira might have forgotten to mention. Basically, this letter gets him through inspections in most places. All guilds accept it, and it can even score him a meeting with the king in places like Bayralik. It's like VIP access, super powerful, but yeah, tons of people are trying to snag it for no good reason. Barlux suggests destroying the letter in the guild if Shin's not feeling confident about keeping it safe. But Shin's got this. He insists he can protect it and that he won't let Tira down for trusting him. They end the meeting with a fist bump, and Barlux can't wait to see Shin unleash his skills. After a long day, Shin crashes at an inn, hoping for tomorrow so he can level up once he gets his guild card. The next day, he wakes up, but sadly, the dude just can't seem to wake up in the real world. He heads to the guild, and Celica compliments his new outfit. He blushes, thinking a bottom-tier adventurer shouldn't be looking all snazzy. She hands him his guild card, explaining there are 9 adventurer ranks from SS and S to A through G. He earns points to level up by finishing jobs, and he can only take jobs up to 2 ranks higher than his. Excitedly, Shin shows her the first job he picks off the board, which is harvesting hilt grass. Celica says there's a big need for it as a potion ingredient, and there's no time constraint. As Shin heads out, Celica thinks he's a weird dude for not showing off, even though Barlux knows just how skilled he really is. 3 hours of searching for hilt grass later, Shin is starting to wonder why he hasn't found any yet. The bro thought it'd be a total breeze. He decides to chill, since the monsters around are probably weak enough to take down with basic weapons. Just then, his map starts showing a monster moving fast. It's a level 359 Skullface Jack, sporting a light-type sword and a strong shield. He spots a wagon a little ways off, and realizes this thing is on a rampage, even though his map looks a little weird. Shin considers launching a quick attack, but the Skullface Jack is super quick, dude blocks and dodges like a pro. His sword doesn't seem to do much damage, so he unleashes his limit-off move, slashing it hard. The giant monster goes down, vanishing and leaving Shin with a gemstone, while its sword just goes flying. Shin's feeling pumped. He's finally realizing how strong he is, and maybe this game is about to get wild. Suddenly, that light-type sword crashes through a castle window, causing everyone to freak out, thinking His Highness is under attack. Lady Ryo, the princess, tells the guards to get an appraiser fast to check out the sword's materials and figure out who chucked it into the castle. Meanwhile, Shin makes his way back to the kingdom and finds a crowd gathered around 4 injured people. He asks the guy who had shown him around what's happening, and the dude explains that 12 people got ambushed by a skullface in the woods, but only 4 made it. It must be that wrecked wagon he saw earlier. People are buzzing about a sword flying out of the woods and crashing into the castle, but luckily no one got hurt. The guy asks Shin if he knows anything, but Shin quickly says no, just out harvesting hilt grass. The guy tells him to hit him up if he remembers anything, since the higher-ups are looking into the case. Shin's glad no one got hurt at the castle, and swings by the guild to give them the heads up. When he arrives, he sees a bunch of people chatting about the skullface. He tells Celica he took down the skullface and snagged a gemstone from it. He mentions this monster was a unique one, with an enormous sword, and even destroyed his weapon. Celica's reaction seems to make Shin want to see her blush, but then an elf lady shows up and tells him to quit teasing her colleague. The elf lady introduces herself as Els. Celica whispers that Shin took down the skullface Jack, and Els is like, "No way. That's hard to believe." Sadly, Shin didn't bring the monster with him since the Skullface's gear wasn't anything to write home about. ELS tells him he'll need either a rank B or a hefty amount of cash to get his hands on gear from a Jack-level monster. Even though Shin doesn't seem like the adventurer type, she takes the gemstone to check if it has the Skullface Jack's mana. He asks Els if Skullfaces pop up often in the northern woods, and she explains that undead monsters arise when mana merges with the grudges of the deceased. The northern woods are packed with savage creatures, claiming many lives. Shin also drops that the Skullface Jack is special since it's level 359. Els tells Celica to use the gems to analyze the monster's strength while she handles the reception desk. After Celica steps away, Els tells Shin that if what he says is true, he's as strong as an A-rank party all on his own. She knows what's up, so Shin asks her to keep this between them. After that, Shin heads over to a restaurant, and guess who shows up? It's Celica. He asks if her twin sister, Celica, works here, and she says yes. She brings him a drink and asks if she can share his table. Moments later, a tall, fit guy walks in like he owns the place, and sits right across from Shin, who can't help but wonder who this dude is. Shin realizes the guy's using a legendary magic spear called Venom, but the dude quickly introduces himself. His name is Wilhelm Avis, and he's totally not fazed by Shin's newbie vibe. Shin asks what kind of things he's done to scare people, and Wilhelm says folks call him Wilhelm the Vampire, cause he takes down tons of undead. Shin comments it's probably because of his pale skin. Hearing this, people start feeling sorry for the unlucky dude, thinking he looks like someone who's asking for trouble. Wilhelm explains that it's because of the draining ability of Venom. It can consume life force and give it to the user. Just then, Celica arrives with food for both guys, and they dig in. Next, Shin checks out the library, eager to learn more about this world. He finds the history of the Bayrelicht Kingdom, which was established 511 years ago. Remembering Tira told him about the Dusk of Prosperity happening 500 years ago, he thinks that must be around that time. He keeps flipping through pages until he comes across one that mentions the in-game races representing the people in this world. Back at the castle, Barlux and the crew are having a closed meeting to discuss the sword and the monster situation. Barlux reports that the Slayer only returned with a gem, which is currently under examination. Someone from the castle wonders why the Slayer didn't take the Skullface's sword or armor, and a lady retorts that the Slayer didn't find it impressive. The dude also mentions that the appraisal confirmed the gem is level 369. Barlux suggests keeping a close eye on any similar monsters in the woods. Another guy chimes in, saying the monster's level is comparable to a king, and a lady mentions she's sent investigators to dig into it. Barlux warns that Skullfaces come out at night, so knights should be on red alert. The guy then asks about the unusual gear the Skullface had, and the identity of its slayer. Barlux spills that he can only disclose info about the sword, since the slayer requested to keep their identity a secret. The guy mentions there's a theory that the sword crashing into the castle and the Skullface falling are connected since it all happened on the same day. Barlux asks what kind of sword it was, and the guy leans in, saying to keep it just between them before explaining that the light-type sword might even be more legendary than their royal sword. Now everyone's super curious about who that clueless slayer could be. On a sunny day, Shin's just chilling on a bench, munching on some food when a little girl shows up, staring at him like he's a snack. He offers her some food, and she snatches it right away. To Shin, she's got this tiger beast girl vibe going on, but she doesn't look like a beggar, so he wonders if she's lost. After scarfing down the meal, she thanks him and introduces herself as Mill. He returns the intro, and asks where she's headed when Wilhelm rolls up. Mill points at Wilhelm and lets Shin know he's there to pick her up. Both adventurers are pretty surprised to run into each other again. And Shin asks if Mill is Wilhelm's kid, and he explains she's one of the kids from the church orphanage, and he's supposed to be looking for her. Just as they're about to bounce, Mill rushes back to Shin and whispers in his ear to save the fox in the northern woods. Later that night, Shin can't help but wonder why she picked him for this mission. But he knows he needs to reach out to Schnee. He just hopes it's not a death trap waiting to happen. The next day, he hits up the Moon Sanctum to ask Tira about this blade he's got, but she only knows it's an ancient sword. Shin tells her it's Blue Moon, his master's sword. He adds that only its creators himself and Schnee, or people they pick, can use it. Tira takes a look at the sword and freaks out a bit, worried it might swallow her up if she holds it. Eventually, she admits that things get whack whenever he comes around. Shin apologizes and says that Blue Moon will let him know if Schnee remembers him. She finally agrees to hold on to it. He also hands her 2 letters, which will help him find out if she hears from Schnee. He tells her just to write the recipient's name and say send. Tira's curious why he won't do it himself, and he explains he tried last night, but it didn't work. She wonders if the cards will do the trick, so Shin tests them out and she confirms they do, but not for Schnee. The cards only work if you've met someone in this world. Tira asks if he can share some cards with her since she might need them for her mage ambitions. Shin suggests it can cover the cost of sending a message, and she's down. Then he bounces, while the unfortunate loser begins to ponder what she'll do with those cards. Shin makes his way to the northern woods, but he's got no clue how to save the fox. As he gets deeper in, he hears voices yelling, "Leave! Leave!" He wonders if it's some kind of barrier, but since his resistance to mental interference is so strong, it doesn't faze him. Still, it's a major red flag that something's up, so he keeps moving until he reaches a shrine. The mental chatter just stops there, and as he goes in, he hears something crash. Curious as ever, he checks it out and finds a little fox caught in a magic circle. He notices it's poisoned and cursed, so he quickly scoops it up and heals it. Just a moment later, he hears a sound and checks out his map. Whoa! Tons of enemies pop up. He steps outside and pulls out a spear, taking them all down in one shot. But then he spots a couple of enemies that weren't on the map earlier and wonders what's up. Suddenly, the two animal statues in the shrine morph into huge monsters invaded golems, level 674. They try to pounce on him, but he dodges. First, he casts shadow binds to hold them still, but they unleash a nasty miasma that blinds him. He notices it's also hurting the fox, and he's stuck in the dark without a clue where the enemies are. As he's trying to figure out his next move, the fox makes a sound, guiding him to the magic circle. Now he can see through the mist and target the enemies. He goes in with his arc bind and cataclysmic strike, taking out the golems. With them gone, the miasma vanishes, and the fox seems way better. Shin checks the fox's stats and sees it's an elemental, level 211. It totally looks like it wants to tag along, and he's never seen invaded golems with miasma and an elemental kitten in the game before, though. So maybe this is a clue on how to find his way back to his world. Meanwhile, Master Schnee gets a letter from Tira and wonders where she scored the magical item. She checks the letter and sees Shin's name on it. Shin steps out of the shrine, planning to report to the guild when he gets to town, but he's keeping the elemental a secret for now. Then, he tames the little fox on the condition that he keeps its level and species a mystery. He names it Yuzuha. Minutes later, he gets a message from Tira saying she sent her master a note and will let him know if she hears back. She also asks if it's possible to attach items to cards and send those too. He tells her to say hi to Schnee for him, and then heads over to the guild. When he gets to the guild, he reports to the two annoying twin sisters. They're trying super hard to grab his attention with their silliness, but he's not having it. He heads over to the job board and spots a skilled successor job needed at the orphanage next to a church in the west. He takes the job since it'll give him a chance to see Millie alone. Next thing, he arrives at the church orphanage and asks to see Millie about something. She lights up when she sees him and runs in for a hug, with how excited she is. The woman there can tell he's a good guy. Shin introduces himself as an adventurer, and the woman introduces herself as Trya, the church's nun. With Tria's go-ahead, he asks Millie if this is the little fox she was talking about, and she nods vigorously. She thanks him, and Shin tells Yuzuha to thank her too. Then she asks Tria to share more about her requests. Tria explains she's looking for someone with the Purify skill to teach it to Millie. Shin wonders what she needs it for, healing or curing. He then tells Tria he can teach her, but it's up to her. Tria starts talking about rewards, but Shin quickly cuts in, saying he doesn't want cash. Instead, he wants to learn more about Mill's powers and hopes she'll share any info the church gets. Tria pauses for a moment, trying to figure out what he's saying, until Mill assures her he's okay to go with it. Then, she accepts. Shin wants to know if anyone comes to the church with anything interesting to say, especially about Milla's powers. Tria tells him that Mille has the title of star composer and sometimes has wild visions, but they've never been wrong. She can predict his future. Tria thinks Mille might have asked him for help because she saw something. To keep her safe from bad folks, she's told her crew to be careful who they mention Mille's powers to. Then she brings up Wilhelm, who helps them and keeps the bad guys away from the kids. Hearing this, Shin takes the job. Tria tells him he'll also be teaching Lacia, the former priest's granddaughter, to learn the Purify skill. Shin thinks that makes sense, and she says it would help if Lacia inherited the church. All the kids in the orphanage are playing with Yuzuha while Shin and Mille hang out, watching everyone when one of the church sisters comes over and asks if he's going to save them. Shin's a bit confused about whether she means them or the nun, and she clarifies that it's about the nun potentially getting rid of the orphanage. She says the church doesn't have a current priest, so they need someone new. Shin asks why Tria can't take over, and she explains that it has to be someone with a special skill. That's why they need the Purify skill. She adds that the greedy current priest wants to shut down the orphanage, and the former priest's daughter might have a stronger claim to the church. Shin is blown away and asks why a priest would want to get rid of the orphanage. The sister tells him the priest's a bum who only cares about money. Right then, Mill jumps in, saying Shin will save them, which makes her feel a lot better. Shin asks the sister if Mill's usually right, and she nods. He pats Mill's head, and she turns all cute and blushy. A moment later, Tria steps out of the church, calling for Shin, and finds him chilling under a tree with all the kids snoozing all over him. Tria brings her sister Lacia over to meet Shin, and gives him the heads up that Lacia can be a bit clumsy, but is super hardworking. Shin tells Lacia that he'll teach her the Purify skill, but it's up to her to learn it. Then, he asks if they know where a bunch of powerful undead show up, and Tria says the ghost plains are the spot. Suddenly, Wilhelm pops in, recognizing Shin as the adventurer who took on the quest. He straight up asks Shin what he's after and what the sisters told him. Shin replies that they filled him in about Mill, and the adventurer from the orphanage who helps keep her secret safe. Tria backs Shin up, saying he's a good guy, plus Mill said it's cool. Wilhelm says if Mille trusts him, then he's good too. Shin reassures them he won't spill any beans or pull any shady stuff, but Wilhelm immediately points his venom spear at him, warning Shin better not mess up or he'll put him down. They joke about his impatient vibe, giving him a bit of a harsh review. Shin explains that Leisha needs to take out 200 undead over level 150 while holding a prayer orb to learn Purify. Leisha's all like, "This is gonna take ages." To help her out, Shin says he'll weaken the monsters so Leisha can deal the final blow, which counts for her kill. He mentions that getting a prayer orb can be tough, but he's already got one, so they're set. The tall, fit dude, Wilhelm, thinks Shin's alright, but insists he can't leave Leisha alone with those high-level undead, so he says he'll tag along. Shin agrees, and Triya wishes Leisha good luck. Next morning, Shin and Yuzuha are strolling through the church corridor when they spot Wilhelm up ahead. He gets closer and asks if Shin's the chosen one, but Shin acts clueless. Wilhelm explains what it is, and when Shin asks about past lives, Wilhelm says nope, it's mostly just info about items and monsters. Wilhelm admits he's never seen anyone remember a past life, but says he won't pressure Shin to share everything. He warns Shin to watch who he mentions the chosen one thing to, since most people don't know about it. Surprisingly, Wilhelm shows some concern, which makes Shin wonder if people actually fear him, but he brushes it off, saying he doesn't care what others think. Shin sees him as a hero protecting the orphanage, but Wilhelm says the kids cry because some greedy jerks won't leave them alone, and he just wants to shut them up. That cracks Shin up. Then he gets a message from Tira, saying she heard back from her master. She'll be back as soon as she wraps up her work. She wants him to keep them in the loop once he leaves Berelic. Her master also has a bunch of questions about him. Just then, the top left of Shin's interface starts blinking, important, and he clicks it, opening a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Wilhelm sees it and pulls out his own letter. They're both surprised to discover they've got the same one. As they bring the letters close, they resonate and glow. The next morning, Shin, Wilhelm, and Lacia head to the Ghost Plains to hunt down some undead. Lacia's sweating bullets already. Shin hands her the prayer orb and tells her to keep holding on to it. They stroll along until they come across some undead. The undead make a move to attack, and Shin blasts them with a single ablution spell. He tells Lacia to take on the biohounds. She points her weapon at a downed undead, chants heal, and poof, they vanish. As a new wave of enemies comes in, Shin and Wilhelm jump in to fight, while Lacia heals with her magic. They keep moving, and hit a blue wall-like barrier, a seal set up by the guild. Wilhelm swipes his guild card across it, and it opens up. As they pass through, Wilhelm warns them that the undead past this point are tougher, so they better watch out. Shin checks his map and spots enemies up ahead, including wrapped raptors and jumpkins. He tells Wilhelm to handle the ones in front. He'll take the ones on the left, and Yuzuha will stick with Leisha to cover any surprises. Leisha has a healing spree and levels up like crazy, even while feeling kinda scared. Meanwhile, people from the castle catch wind of the undead in the Ghost Plains and join the hunt. The skull faces they encounter are strong, but Lady Ryon swings in with a sword that flew into the castle, making things way easier. The elite squad from the castle struggles against a massive skull face, and a silver-haired elf called Schnee shows up to help take it down. And after they defeat the monster, Schnee heals everyone in the elite group with her wide heal magic. They recognize her and give her a bow, and she returns the gesture. The head of the elite group briefs her about the recent skullface sightings and hopes the last one was the one she just killed. She mentions she'll keep searching and reminds them to use their magical items if they run into any monsters. The tall, fit jerk takes down a big skullface, and Lacia suddenly feels weird as she's about to use her magic. Shin tells her the feeling means she's close to learning a new skill. She zones out, thinking she might be dead, but then her mind is flooded with how to use the Purify skill. Shin congratulates her on leveling up, and she's pumped that they can now save the orphanage. They plan to take a quick break before heading back to Berelict, but then they spot magical energy in the sky that revives the undead. This magic drains power from monsters, causing them to lose form and vanish. Then it collects all that energy to form a massive monster with a level of 804, one seriously deadly creature looking to snack on humans. They think they'll be fine, since they have the seal, but then the huge monster leaps and shatters the seal with one smash. Not just that monster, but a bunch of other skullface enemies show up. Wilhelm is like, "Let's break through and run," but Shin reminds him that the seal's gone, and he can't let the monsters run wild, so he's planning to put a stop to them no matter what. He shouts, "Limit off," and tells Wilhelm to take care of Yuzuha and Lacia. Wilhelm's blown away by Shin's power and is itching to hear more when they get back home. Shin unleashes a lightning banker magic to carve a path through the monsters for Wilhelm and Lacia to escape. Once they're out, Shin pulls out his sword and Yuzuha kicks off with her foxfire to strike the enemies. The giant monster roars and gobs more skullfaces join the fray. Shin feels like it'll never end since they keep coming, so he makes a move with Flying Sparrow Thunderstrike, which only takes out a tiny fraction but does dig deep into the ground. He wishes Schnee were around for backup. Suddenly, he spots a blue marker on his map getting closer and makes a quick dash to get nearer to it. Turns out the blue marker is Schnee, who had gotten lost. After a moment of silence, the enemies charge at them, and badass Yuzuha raises a giant wall to block them. Schnee hugs her weirdo master, Shin, hoping for some killer moves from him. Shin fumbles for words until he finally says, "Yo, I'm back," and she welcomes him with tears streaming down her face. Just then, Yuzuha gets exhausted, making the barrier fade, and the massive monster charges right at them. Now, they're forced to battle while promising to catch up later. They both chant Sanctuary to create a magical light circle in the sky, wiping out and vanishing the enemies. Finally, Shin takes his mighty sword and slashes the gigantic monster in half. Just before its soul escapes, it tries to plead, "Give that power to me," but its bluster is nothing to Shin. Then, Shin claims its gemstone. Right after they take down that massive monster, Shin's like, "Hey, can we chat for a sec?" He spills the tea about everything that went down after he was sent off to meet Gatekeeper Origin, until he woke up in a field 500 years later. Schnee feels a weight lifted off her shoulders hearing all that. Then she tells him the dungeon just vanished, and her and the other support crew were like, "What the heck? Why are we still here?" So they decide to look for him. But then bam, a bunch of earthquakes hit, and chaos breaks loose. So they had to split up. Eventually, she made her way back to the Moon Sanctum, and that's where we pick things up now. Shin's worried about her calling him master in front of others since he doesn't want to blow his cover, so he's like, "Just call me by my name." She's a bit like, "Seriously?" but rolls with it. She then asks what Shin's up to now, and he replies he's thinking about checking out this spot he read about in the kingdom's library. Shnee's been there for just a quick peek, but she's not sure what it's like inside. Curious, she asks if he'll take her back if he finds a way to leave this place, to which he says totally. He then probes about what she remembers from the game, and she replies all of it from the day they dropped into this land. She explains herself, saying she got more aware during that wild time the support crew dubbed the Death Game. Before that, it was like she was just watching a movie. In other words, those other characters knew they'd peace out once they logged off. After a rough convo about their past until the next morning, they decide to celebrate once they're back at the Moon Sanctum. Then she asks him where Yuzuha is. Shin introduces Yuzuha to her, but tells her to keep it on the down low. Schnee immediately realizes Yuzuha isn't your average spirit when she spots those three tails. Suddenly, Yuzuha wakes up and starts talking to Shin. He's like, "No way," but Yuzuha's all clear-headed now that the giant monster's gone. He tells Yuzuha to keep it quiet around people and asks it to merge its three tails into one, which it does. Schnee picks Yuzuha up for some petting, and then they bolt out of the forest to catch up with Shin's buddy. Meanwhile, Wilhelm, the lazy dude with a ripped bod, is sprinting with Leisha on his back when they spot something barreling toward them at breakneck speed. They start to freak out, thinking it's the monster's allies coming for them. But surprise, Shin and Schnee pop up, causing Wilhelm to get a little flustered because he mixed them up while Leisha passes out. Back at the castle, the crew discovers the wrecked ground, but they have no clue what went down. Clueless as always, Princess Lady Ryo wonders who could have made that magical light circle in the sky that healed everyone and wiped out the monsters. Gadras, one of the knights, spots Shin's epic sword at the edge of the damage and quickly alerts Lady Ryo. They gotta figure out what kind of skills could pull off something like that. Then they see a falcon mark on the sword, and Gadras says he knows a blacksmith who makes swords like this and stamps them with falcons. He shows off a bit of what the sword can do before revealing that the blacksmith is the Black Blacksmith, the best there ever was. Lady Ryo can't believe high humans still exist. She thought they all disappeared. Gadras informs her that the blacksmith is the owner of the Moon Sanctum, and she decides they'll visit when they get back to town. She's even fired up about challenging the blacksmith to a duel if she finds him. Gadras, ever the voice of reason, warns her not to rush in and attack, claiming she's just testing his skills, and honestly, her look says she's got some sense after all. Wilhelm then asks Shin to spill who he is, like the stuff he's been up to, and how he scored Schnee, who doesn't bow to anyone to tag along with him. He's about to give Schnee the credit for taking down that giant monster when Wilhelm suddenly shoves his venom spear in Shin's face. Shin's shocked he figured him out, but Wilhelm says he saw that flashy spell pop off and caught up without breaking a sweat. After some friendly spear banter, he reveals his true identity and his bond with Schnee, leaving the useless scumbag in surprise. Shin inquires if any records of high humans are still around, and Wilhelm reveals they're mostly about how ridiculously strong and skilled Shin is. Schnee chimes in saying others left behind all sorts of stories too. Anyway, Shin is proud to call himself a blacksmith and offers to fix up Wilhelm's venom spear at a sweet price. But Wilhelm can't trust him because he looks like a sleazy merchant. Then lazily Leisha wakes up and is all smiles seeing Shin. They introduce Schnee Razor, and she's starstruck to meet her. As they head out of the ghost plains, Leisha almost trips up, and Shin jokes it's probably from all that horse-like running they did. Wilhelm reminds Shin that his job ends once Leisha learns the skill, so if anything pops up at the church, that's on them. But Shin hands Wilhelm a card just in case things go sideways, and he grumbles that he'll only be in dire straits if he has to use it. Basically, it sounds like trouble is gonna find Shin soon. Shin's like, Bring it on! He can't ditch the first friend he made in Bayrelict or the kids he's trying to keep safe. So grab your popcorn, folks, because that phone call for help is coming. Finally, Shin and Schnee roll back into the moon sanctum late at night, smelling something delicious, so they decide to grab a bite before anything else. Tira rushes out from the inner room and hugs her master, almost spilling the beans on what she wanted to say in the letter before she calms down. Then Tira realizes the dude standing there is Shin and wonders how they ended up together, explaining that will take forever, so they decide to eat first. Tira freaks out when her master announces Shin's joining them for dinner. Schnee feels a bit dumb for not telling Tira that Shin is the moon sanctum's owner. Tira's completely floored that the owner is a legendary high human. Shin introduced himself when they first met, but I guess Tira didn't take that seriously. Fearful of getting kicked out, she quickly apologizes. Then Shin introduces his chatty elemental buddy, Yuzuha. Everything is brand new to Tira. Schnee whips up a killer dinner and claims she snagged the best of the best for this special occasion, but she can't elaborate because, well, time. Shin glows about the high-end ingredients Schnee used, but Tira yells that nobody would even think about getting those fancy ingredients, let alone actually cook with them. They share some heartfelt thanks for the meal and dig into the food, with both Shin and Tira begging for seconds. After dinner, Shin's kinda bothered thinking about his other support characters, so he asks Schnee about them. She tells him they all figured it was better not to stress over him. Shin appreciates that it's at least easier not to look for someone who might not even be there. Tira, who's hilariously drunk, starts to ramble. Schnee heads to her room to sleep while Shin and Yuzuha wander to their own room as well. In the middle of the night, Shin finds Schnee has snuggled up next to him in bed, and he can't sleep at all now. He watches as tears slide down her face and silently apologizes, gently wiping her tears away, even though he has no idea why she's upset. The next day, Shin wakes up and can't find Schnee next to him. He notices a silver hair and wonders what's going on. When he takes a closer look, he sees Yuzuha has already transformed into her human form. He's not ready for this, so he digs around and finds her an elemental dress to wear in the game. Schnee and Tira are shocked to see Yuzuha as a human. After that, Schnee gets breakfast going, and everyone thanks her for the meal. Shin then asks Yuzuha what she's doing at the shrine, and she says it's the least uncomfortable place to be. He asks if she knows about the symbols in the magical circle, but she has no clue about those either. When he presses about the people who disappeared 500 years ago, she's totally in the dark. Yuzuha explains that she was napping outside when a natural disaster hit, and she tried to stop it, but it ended up hurting her. So, she was just resting in the shrine when Shin found her. He tells her he managed to save her thanks to Mille, and that Mille should totally get something nice for that. Schnee suggests they treat Mille to some kafal, which is an elven baked treat made by Tira. Shin reminds them that the Moon Sanctum doesn't sell food, and Schnee points out he's the only one who can unlock the armory if they want to restock. So, he decides he'll whip up a few swords to help replenish the inventory. Then Schnee tells Shin there's someone he has to meet, Gyrart, one of his support characters. Shin wonders how Gyrart is still alive since high beasts don't usually last beyond 150 years. Schnee explains that a few days won't make much difference, since Gyrart's been waiting for him for a while. She reminds him that Gyrart united the beast tribes and formed the Farned Beast Alliance, and everyone calls him the first Beast King. The current king has all the military prowess and skills, and he's been waiting peacefully for Gyrart. Shin tells Yuzuha and Schnee to get ready to head out, and Schnee tells Tira that she's coming along too. They might not be so strict about the Moon Sanctum now that Shin's back. Even though she's a bit worried about the shop, she'll follow them as long as they want her there. They need to get moving. But Schnee plans to report on the skull faces to the kingdom, while Shin wants to make those swords first and then check out the guild for a job towards Farned to level up. He also mentions he'll send her a message card about where to meet up later. Then Schnee suggests forming a party so they can use something called telepathy for voice chat, and she nudges Tira to register as an adventurer, and Tira heads off to change while Schnee leaves and Shin and Yuzuha go to the forge. At the forge, Shin tells Yuzuha she can look at the weapons, but can't touch them because some of them are cursed. He starts crafting swords and nails them perfectly one after the other. Tira eventually changes back into her adventurer outfit. Yuzuha shifts back into her little fox form, and they all head off to the guild. Tira can't believe her eyes when they hit the streets leading to the guild, with people everywhere. She's acting like a little kid at an amusement park, but then she grabs Shin's hand as if she knows the way, until he reminds her he's the one taking her there. At the guild, Shin levels up to rank E, and he's like, "How did this even happen? I haven't completed any jobs." Celica tells him it's because he took down a high-ranking skullface, and a whole horde of them too. They verified his reports, so boom, promotion. Then she asks if Tira is his girlfriend since they were holding hands like a couple, but Shin says nah, they're just traveling together on business. He was just thinking she'd register as an adventurer and grab a guild card while stopping by. Celica tries to chat more about it, but but he quickly shuts that down. Then he asks if she has any info on sites the place is wrecked during the Dusk of Prosperity, but Celica says they can't share that with anyone under rank B. He agrees to come back when he's leveled up, and then asks if there's any job available on the way to Farned. She checks her records and finds a wagon quest to Beirun's staging post. She says they're heading out this afternoon when the bell rings twice, and 2 other adventurers have already signed on, so he should meet up with them. Since Tira's guild card won't be ready for a bit and Shin is waiting for the job in the afternoon, they decide to wander around town on the way to the church. After exploring, they find the church and see Leisha cleaning there, and the 2 ladies introduce themselves, and when Leisha hears Shni's name, she starts firing off a ton of questions. Who's gonna answer all that? And Mile is super happy to see Shin and Yuzuha again. She always feels like they shouldn't leave her alone. Leisha tells Shin she'll be taking over as the next head of the church, and Tria mentions the kids are so happy too, but don't know how to thank him. Shin feels flattered and asks about Wilhelm, and she says he's out investigating other priests. No one really knows why that greedy pig wants to take over the church. Then, he gives them stuff enchanted with all sorts of magic, including Mill. Suddenly, a bunch of kids rush in and swarm Shin, begging him to stay and play with them. In the next instant, they're all over Tira, and she starts screaming. What a mess! As they leave the church, Leisha apologizes to Tira for the chaos. Tira's a bit taken aback since she's never played with kids before, but she admits they're cute and fun. Next, they head to the guild to grab Tira's guild card, and then swing by the Moon Sanctum. Shin's not surprised Tira forgot they were picking up the house, but she thinks it's ridiculous to haul it around. However, it feels totally normal to Shin since he owns it. Along the road, he pulls out an awesome crystal that's enchanted with the teleport spell. He tells her they can use it to zap over to the Moon Sanctum. Tira thinks he's amazing, and he adds that he made the crystal himself. They use it to teleport over, and then he chants storage to shrink the house down into a ring in transport mode. Once that's all sorted, they're ready for the job. When they arrive, they recognize Nock's wagon right away. Shin and Tira introduce themselves to the first adventurer, who's named Gaien. The other red-haired adventurer introduces himself as Tsubaki. Then, a man rolls up and introduces himself as Nak the Merchant, and they set off. Meanwhile, the knights report to your majesty about the Moon Sanctum's disappearance. Everyone knows it's an immovable structure that survived the Dusk of Prosperity no one could ever break in. If the Moon Sanctum is actually gone, that's a huge problem for the Beirelict Kingdom. They mention that Shni is headed to the castle, and Lady Rion's sister is worried about her sister not coming back yet. They don't have enough info to act on things right now, so she suggests they wait for Miss Shni to arrive, and your majesty agrees. On their way to Beirun through the forest, Shin tells Tira that anyone taking escort jobs needs to be capable and confident, since bandits are more likely to attack than monsters. Then they decide to introduce themselves again. Gaien is an A-ranked samurai but seems a bit useless with magic. Tsubaki is an E-ranked boxer who can cast support spells to boost speed. Tira, a newbie alchemist rank G, can use a bow, a sword, and even heal spells. Shin, like Gaien, is also a samurai, ranked E, and dabbles in fire and lightning magic. And we can't forget Yuzuha, Shin's little monster. Both Gaien and Tsubaki are impressed that Shin is a samurai who can also cast spells and even has a monster that likes him. Tsubaki thinks Shin might be from Hinamoto since most samurai come from there. Hinamoto is a wild island nation born from a natural disaster and home to tons of samurai and shinobi guilds. Shin asks Gaien about the common guilds in Hinamoto, and he lists Kasho Fugetsu, Majin Keppuroku, and Kuromiko Jinja. These sound like guilds straight out of a game, right? Out of nowhere, some armed bandits stop their wagon and threaten to kill them if they don't hand over all their cash and loot. Nock is trembling like a leaf, so Shin tells him to get in the wagon while Yuzuha stands guard. The bandits say they won't get excited unless they hear some screaming. Most of them even underestimate little Tsubaki, which is a big mistake. Gaien steps in, showing off his sword and telling the bandits to back off or they'll get sliced. But the bandits aren't intimidated at all. They've even done their homework on their ranks. Shin and the others are shocked that these bandits know about them. I'd be curious too. Tira, hiding behind the wagon, sees some bandits lurking behind trees and starts shooting arrows at them. This makes the bandits furious, and bam, a fight breaks out. Tsubaki kicks things off, taking out some mouthy bandits with a cool move called Flashing Vigor in one swift hit. Gaien slashes at a bandit while Shin joins in, cutting down a few more. The bandit leader can't believe these low-ranked adventurers pack so much power. Even though he's the last one standing, he tries to bluff with his magical sword, but Shin just walks up and slices it in half. Then he beats the bandit leader up and ties him up. Tira sees Shin's rage and bloodlust and rushes over to hug him until he calms down. No one really gets what the clueless girl is doing. She later realizes that her master used to calm her down the same way. Gaien explains that the bandits tried to raid their wagon for goods related to the church, not even knowing what to take. All they wanted was to kill a bunch of them and steal whatever they had. Shin recalls that Tria told him they need official permission from the church HQ, to pick the next head, so he wonders if someone is trying to mess things up. But he feels like escorting the wagon was definitely the right call. They finally roll into Beirut, and Nak thanks them while giving them certificates as job completion rewards, which they can cash in at the guild. They head to the guild to report in, and afterward, Guyan and Tsubaki are off to Kilmont, while Shin and Tira plan to go to Farned. Since Farned is quite a trek, Shin suggests they grab a wagon. When they get to the wagon shop, they find all the wagons look pretty similar, so Shin thinks it'd be better to modify one to reduce the shaking and improve the wheel movement for a smoother ride. It's a bit flashy, but in a good way. They want a spacious one that can fit luggage and allow them to sleep comfortably when Schnee arrives. The wagon seller advises them to get horses with strong legs to pull the wagon they want. Shin chimes in that he's heard of people using monsters as wagon pullers. The seller tells him it's true. Some use monsters since they're way stronger, but he'll need to tame one first. Then they head out of the store. Next, we see Shin mulling over the idea of having Yuzuha transform if things get dicey when Schnee suddenly calls him telepathically. She seems to have wrapped up her stuff in the kingdom. Shin shares that they just got a wagon and need to find some horses before heading to Farned. Schnee tells him to leave the monster catching to her. She also informs Shin that there's a big worry about the moon sanctum suddenly disappearing. She'll be in Bairayun within a day, but he's gotta wait for her. Shin promises to let her know when they find an inn. He then tells Tira to check out the sights while they search for a place to stay. They end up finding a good inn through a random woman, but it costs almost half their reward. Shin's a bit worried about it, but Tira insists that the woman probably thought adventurers could afford a nice place. Once they get to their rooms, Yuzuha flops on the bed and transforms into her human form. Shin decides it's time to take care of his sword. Tira pops in to ask if he'd let her master know they're staying in the city. He tells her she'll meet them here, but he can't say when. Soon after, they have dinner in their room, and Shin gets up for a quick bath. Unfortunately for him, Yuzuha and Tira beat him to it, so he just continues working on his weapons. But they start acting silly, distracting him, so he steps away from the bathroom. The next morning, Shin gets back to working on the wagon until Schnee shows up, and Tira decides to watch him mod it. To her amazement, Shin tweaks the wheels to stop the shaking in less than a minute. He decides to install the bearings to avoid attracting too much attention. Just then, Schnee calls him to let him know she's outside the woods near the north gate, and he says they'll be there as soon as possible. Shin has to wrap up at the wagon shop, and then they're off to meet Schnee. They arrive in the woods, and there's a massive monster called Grufazio Jade, level 751, that Schnee caught. Shin curiously asks where she snagged it from, and she says it came from a nearby mountain. He praises her, but she seems to lose all her composure around him. The monster gets curious and nudges Tira with its nose. Then, Shin asks Schnee why she picked this particular beast, and she replies it has to be a beast to pull his wagon. However, Shin gets worried because the monster is way too big for their small wagon. Schnee, anticipating his quirky reaction, gets the monster to shrink down to a size that fits. Tira is so intimidated that she faints. Can you believe how chill Shin and Schnee are about this? Even Shin didn't expect her to bring something so powerful, but he's stoked to have a cool beast pulling their wagon. The monster makes a noise, and Yuzuha translates it, saying they can count on it. Awesome! It's like both monsters can communicate now. Schnee shares that the beast's name is Shimmer, and it's got illusion and thunder skills. Then she reminds Shimmer to be careful around her master. Shin gets Shimmer hitched up to their wagon, and they're set to go visit an old buddy, Jairart, in Farned. Even with Shin's best efforts, they attract tons of attention. But honestly, what can you do? The most important thing is that the wagon doesn't shake, and it even outperforms a royal carriage. In a nutshell, they all dig it. Meanwhile, Yuzuha explains that Shimmer and his mom used to rule the mountain together until an adventurer took down his mom, and only Shimmer survived. An elf rescued him, and he's been training to get stronger and returned to the mountain ever since. When Schnee hears this, she realizes why Shimmer wasn't cautious around her. The monster chimes in, saying he followed her because she smelled familiar, but it turns out it was Tira's scent, meaning Tira is the elf who rescued him when she was a kid. So, Schnee breaks her contract with Shimmer and tells Tira to form a new one with him. Tira makes the contract, and as she feels weak for a moment, Shin scoops her up so she can take a little break. At night, they find a spot to chill and light a fire to keep warm. Schnee tells Shin she let Tira take Shimmer so he can protect her since they can't always be by her side. It's a comfort knowing Shimmer's with her when she makes her choices. Plus, she can summon Shimmer anytime, so they know he's got her back. Schnee then assures Shin she'll be there for him whenever he gets into hot water. Shin feels relieved, telling her she's the one he goes to when he's in a jam. The next morning, they meet two high-ranked folks at the southeastern Farned, right by Ralua Forest. Schnee mentions she sent a message to Jairart, so these two must be here to meet them. They bow and say they've come on the first king's orders, which makes Schnee ask to be taken to Jairart. Shin keeps the wagon going with his power, and Shimmer shrinks down to the size of a dog. As they head towards the mansion, Schnee reveals that these two are Gerard's grandkids. When Gerard sees Shin, he calls him master and admits he never thought he'd see him again in this life. Shin thought Gerard was done for too. Before they get into the main topic, Gerard introduces the current beast King, Wolfgang, his daughter Quore, and his two trusted advisors, Van Ku and Rajim Dalk. Shin introduces himself as a high human. They tell each other to keep it casual, but Gerard can't resist his sarcastic vibe, calling Shin master, something he doesn't usually do. He says it's the only way to keep his group calm. People in Farned think high humans are legendary beings to be both feared and respected. Gerard and Shin reminisce about their last big monster hunt, sharing a laugh. Gerard wants to boast about founding a nation, but Schnee already spilled the tea, so that's not really news. Schnee figures it's better she mentioned it instead of letting Gerard exaggerate. She then brews some tea as they continue chatting. Shin shares the same story he told Schnee with Gerard, who's also been looking for him, but wasn't able to find him. Before Shin can bring anything else up, Gerard quickly tells him he's got less than a month left to live. Surprised, Shin asks how he knows this, and Gerard mentions he's felt off for weeks, but it hit him when Schnee told him about Shin. Then, Gerard challenges Shin to a duel. He wants to fight him, the strongest warrior. Oh my god, right? Shin wonders if Gerard wants to go out in a blaze of glory, but Gerard can't help wishing for that, still. Shin accepts the challenge and asks if Gerard has informed his team. Gerard says he told them about his life expectancy, but hasn't mentioned the duel yet. He plans to do that soon. He also notes that his two advisors, Van Ku and Rajim Dalk, have fought by his side since Shin vanished. Both of them are older beasts, just like Gerard. Then he praises Wolfgang as an amazing ruler who genuinely listens to his people and walks alongside them. He adds Wolfgang's already a solid replacement for him. His only regret is never getting to duel Shin. Later that night, Gerard talks to his group about where he wants to die and reveals he's asked Shin for a duel before his time is up, setting the date for a week later. Core isn't cool with this at all. She wonders if everyone's just gonna sit around while their master talks about this stuff. But Gerard reassures her he's had a long life, and she'll understand why he's lived so long in a week. She doesn't really have a choice but to respect her master's wishes. Gerard tells them they'll battle in Ralua Forest, claiming this fight will be the final epic showdown of his life, and he wants them to be there to witness it. Shin helps Gerard get his shield weapon back into top shape in the blacksmith room of the Moon Sanctum. Gerard feels like he's taken a trip back in time when he sees it. Then, he asks if Shin plans to return to his world if he finds a way home, leaving Schnee behind. After some thought, Shin says he would go home, that's why he's been fighting. This surprises Gerard, but he can't really do anything about it. Shin wishes everything could be resolved at once for him and Schnee, but the truth is, you can't always get what you want. He tells Gerard he's looking forward to the next day, duel day. The next day, Gerard is totally pumped and ready for the duel, and they all head to Ralua Forest in Shin's wagon. Even his crew hasn't seen him grin like this for ages. When they arrive, Schnee encourages Shin to give it his all and not sweat the small stuff. She bows and tells him she'll leave Gerard's fate in his hands. Wolfgang and Quor also vow to remember Gerard's teachings as the first king. Then the fight kicks off with some warm-ups while everyone watches. The warm-up feels like nostalgia from their fights 500 years ago, even though it seriously feels like the sky might fall. Gerard transforms into a massive fang and recalls that Shin said he'd fight hard without relying on the titles he earned by defeating the final boss, cause that wouldn't be fair. But Gerard still wants to go all out against Shin, believing this is the only moment his fangs can reach him. Shin makes the first move, but Gerard dodges and pops up behind him, underestimating Shin's speed. Shin blocks Gerard's attack with his sword, and then channels some major energy to throw at him. Shin tries to counter it, but it's a tough battle. Gerard keeps slipping behind him for sneak attacks, but Shin evades them every time. Going all in, Shin uses haze, while Gerard counters with legendary excellence at the same time. The sheer power from both sides shatters Shin's sword into pieces, while only nicking Gerard's fang a bit. In the end, Gerard lands a solid hit on Shin before collapsing and reverting to his human form. Shin is impressed with Gerard's strategy, and the fact that he managed to hit him. Gerard boasts that he didn't live for 500 years for nothing. He finally got to fulfill his long-awaited wish. Then, he asks Shin to do something for him as a reward for landing that blow. Shin agrees, and Gerard peacefully passes away. It's game over for him. Shin returns with Gerard's body and tells his crew the shocking news that their king managed to hit him, a high human, which means Gerard leveled up to his rank. His confidants feel relieved, knowing he looks satisfied, even in death. Everyone in the nation mourns the loss of their first king, and his crew goes all out to give him the best funeral. Later that night, Schnee spots her master sitting alone outside, gazing at the sky. She rushes over and hugs him, offering to help in any way she can. With tears streaming down his face, he says he knew this is what Gerard wanted, but it still hurts to lose a friend. Schnee tells him he did his duty and it's okay to be sad. Their next stop is to meet Schweid, the High Dragnir, one of Shin's former support peeps. Schnee and Tira are wearing cosplay items gear Shin made to help them blend in as beasts. Honestly, they're killing it, and I might just propose if I were there. They navigate their way to where representatives from different nations hang out while looking for Schweid, Wolfgang, and Core guide them inside. On the way, Shin asks Schnee if Schweid is like Girard in status, and she replies he was actually the first emperor of the Dragon Empire, Kilmont, but he cut ties with the royal family. She adds, Schweid has just been living it up ever since Kilmont got stable. Eventually, they reach the entrance of a room, where the guard shows them to their seats and goes to fetch Lord Schweid. Wolfgang excuses himself, saying he has a meeting while telling them to let Core know if they need anything. Moments later, Lord Schweid shows up and immediately bows to his master, Shin. He's pumped to see him and ready to jump back into action, but his body is screaming the opposite. Still, Shin tells him to chill out because he's about to spill everything he told Schnee, and Schnee's there to back him up. Schweid can't quite get why Schnee calls him master instead of just his name, but he rolls with it. First off, Schweid's all curious about Schnee's outfit and asks why she's dressed like that. She tells him it's to match Shin's tastes, and he's like, okay, that works. Then Shin opens up about how he feels sad about his death, but hey, at least he went out as a warrior. Schweid then hits Shin up, asking what's next on the agenda. Shin mentions he's read everything in the local libraries, so now he's thinking of checking out the place. Schweid's like, sweet, I'm heading back to Kilmont, but I'll totally catch up with you later. It's been ages since they teamed up, and Schweid suggests using telepathy to keep in touch. Before he bounces, he hands Shin his weapon, Nagazuki. It's been a minute since Shin's held it, but it feels just right. Shin mentions he kept it in good shape, and Schweid can tell it's way more powerful than the Nagizuki he remembers. Shin's mana control has leveled up big time since fixing Girard's gear, making it like 5 times stronger. Everyone's totally impressed. At the guild, Shin's itching to level up his adventurer rank, aiming for at least a C, so he decides to tackle some goblins as his next gig. Core asks if she can join in. Shin's like, sure thing, and she adds she'll finish her other work after. She's been checking out the Ralua forest from that duel they had, making sure it's bouncing back. The place looked like a tornado hit a party and never cleaned up. But Shin asks if he can tag along since he was part of the duel, and she's down for that. First, they're off to hunt goblins, then to the Ralua forest to check it out, and wow, the forest is back to normal. Core says they need to look at the new trees and see if anything's off. She tells them to grab any weird herbs they spot. At the day's end, they report back to the guild to confirm everything is cool. The guild worker hands Shin a letter from Barlux, the guild master of the Bayrelict branch. The letter says he needs to head to Bayrelict as soon as possible, right at the palace. He wonders what's up with that and realizes it's probably about the unique Skullface Jack's sword that crashed into the castle. Now he's got to head there and sort it out before leveling up. Schnee and Tira are in, and Core wants to join, but she's stuck in her country. So he asks to see Wolfgang before heading out for Bayrelict to give him Girard's Death Moon, the handfang weapon of Girard. He mentions it's already changed owners, so Wolfgang can pass it to whoever. Wolfgang's amazed and asks how he got it since he thought they were destroyed in the duel. Shin explains he fixed it up so it was no biggie. He confesses Girard wanted him to have it once the duel was done. He tests it out, and it fits perfectly, so Wolfgang takes it on. Instead of the slow wagon, he uses his crystal item to teleport to a different spot. He checks his map and realizes someone's keeping tabs on them, but he uses his stealth skill. Maybe they're expecting the Moon Sanctum to appear right there, but they forgot it can move. Speaking of the Moon Sanctum, Schnee gets jittery thinking Shin might vanish again, but she quickly changes her tune when he looks her way. They head out, and Shin reminds them he's summoned by Barlux. They roll into the Bayrelict Guild, and Shin updates the 2 clown-themed twin sisters about the letter from the guildmaster. Silica heads off to fetch the guildmaster. Shin asks Celica if she knows what it's about. She says not really, but she expected him to get summoned soon since he's not your average adventurer. Celica teases him about always hanging out with girls, but Shin insists he has guy friends too. He brings up Wilhelm, who he worked with on a side job, and the guild goes dead silent like a graveyard. Celica tells him Wilhelm rarely teams up, and he's got a ton of rumors swirling around him, making him hard to approach, but Shin knows Wilhelm is the real deal. After a few minutes, Silica returns and leads Shin to meet the guildmaster. Inside, he meets Barlux and Arid Royal, who's the gem appraiser for the guild. Barlux tells Shin that Arid checked out that skullface gem he brought in earlier. Shin asks why he was called in. Instead of answering, Arid asks if Shin knows about the sword that crashed into the castle. Shin plays it cool and says he's heard the gossip too. Arijed explains the huge sword landed in the second princess's bedroom, but thankfully, nobody got hurt. He mentions the sword's elemental enchantment, and materials are super impressive, possibly on par with the king's royal sword. The gem from the skullface Shin took down had some serious mana. It's high level for sure. Shin asks how they figured out he was involved. Arid, being the appraiser, says he was told to check out the sword, and the mana left on it matched the gem he brought. They followed the trail and pieced it together. Now with the scoop, the guild can't keep it a secret. Not even Barlux can help. Barlux mentions the only reason it's not worse is that he has a letter from the Moon Sanctum. Getting to the point, Barlux reveals it's the second princess, Lady Ryo, who called for him, and Shin's nervous. She might want to put him on blast for almost hurting royalty. Barlux reassures him he won't be punished, since Lady Ryo's fought Skullfaces herself and knows Shin had to go all out. Shin fills Schnee and Tira in on everything he discussed with Barlux and Aradi. Schnee suggests they might try to recruit him hard or even think about marrying him off to a noble. This totally bums Shin out at the thought of going there, but Schnee says he can just turn down any offers. Plus, they'd lose a huge asset if he bailed on his crew, so that should be enough to say no. Schnee jokes he could tell them she's his fiancée or even claim he's betrothed to Tira if they start playing the marriage game. Then Yuzuha shifts to her human form and yells that she'll be Shin's fiancé. Hilarious antics follow. The next day, Shin's rocking a red uniform as he heads to the palace. Upon arrival, the guard notifies Gadras, who then appears to escort him into the palace. Shin notices Gadras is level 188, definitely one of the kingdom's top dogs. Once he arrives at the princess's room, she thanks him for coming and introduces herself as Ryon Citrail Bayrelict, the second princess. Shin bows and introduces himself as the adventurer, but she waves off the formality, saying he can just call her Ryon. Without wasting time, Shin asks why he's been summoned. She cuts to the chase. It's about the Skullface. She shows him the sword from the safe and asks if he recognizes it. He confirms it's the sword the Skullface was swinging around. Then, she says that adventurers like him, who suddenly shine out of nowhere, are often chosen ones. They summon people when they realize they're powerful, although some play the assassination game with it. Lady Ryon can tell Shin seems harmless, but he admits he hasn't exactly done anything to shake off those vibes. Ryon adds that she's got an intuition skill, and her gut feelings have always been spot on. More importantly, she mentions Shin has that letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum, and everyone knows Schnee doesn't hand those out lightly, especially to anyone shady. Just as she starts to get down to business, Shin freaks out a little, worried she might talk about marriage stuff. Instead, she surprises him by saying she wants him to fight her. Gadras feels like the useless princess, Lady Ryon, is being way too upfront, so he suggests they talk about Shin joining their crew first. But nah, she's eager to test his skills first. Gadras wants her to do things by the book, but she's not having any of his boring ideas. She grabs the box that had Skullface's sword and tells Shin to follow her. They head to a room with a teleportation point. Shin's like, why teleport? And she's all, because we're going somewhere we can fight hard. They teleport to this training ground made for battles between chosen ones, and Shin's curious about the place, and she admits she's not sure what else it was used for. She mentions that teleportation points are old tech from before the dusk of prosperity, and even they don't totally get how it works. Shin thinks it's kinda wild they've got teleportation points when teleportation is supposedly lost magic. Anyway, they both grab weapons and get ready for a showdown. Right before they start, she warns him that she wants to see him sweat because this battle's a test. And then, Gadras kicks things off. They both launch attacks, but it ends up being blade against blade. She drops her sword and goes for a kick, but Shin's quick and dodges it. He can read her stats, so he tweaks his own to match. Then he makes his move, and again it's blade versus blade. It quickly turns into a strength contest. She finally says they can use skills if they want. They both use the flashing vigor skill, but Gadras can barely see any difference in how they're enhanced. She gets ready to attack again, but Shin dodges again, and her sword slams into the ground. If he hadn't moved, he'd be a goner. Looks like they're both equally skilled and quick. Gadras gives Shin props, saying his skills match the princess's. He points out her sword's close to breaking, so Shin suggests calling it quits. They're both too good at dodging defeat to keep fighting. Then, she asks Shin to join them in serving the kingdom, promising him a decent role, nothing like a general. But Shin turns her down. He likes his freedom as an adventurer way more. He tells her she can let him know if she changes her mind. Then he asks her why she has Skullface's sword, especially since she didn't use it against him. She says it's a tradition in her kingdom to give a sword to a woman when proposing. If the guy's unfaithful, she's supposed to use it against him. Shin finds that kinda creepy. She decides she wants to think of Skullface's sword as a gift from him, which makes Shin freak out since that sounds like a proposal. He quickly clarifies it was just an accident when the sword flew. She agrees not to push it. Gadras warns him that some people are plotting to twist this into a setup to arrest him as a criminal and force him into serving the kingdom. Lady Ryon suggests they play it off as tribute. Shin's way cooler with that setup than a marriage proposal, making it so Lady Ryon officially gets a powerful weapon. She says Shin can shake off the kingdom pressure, but Gadras thinks it's still weird. Ryon promises to pay Shin for the sword from her stash. Seeing they both benefit from this deal, she begs him to let her keep the sword. Shin, wanting to stick with his adventurer life, says she can keep it and won't take any money, only asking for access to the magical library's restricted zones. Lady Ryo is puzzled by why this lowlife doesn't seem impressed by the sword, which could give him a laid-back life forever, and then she confesses she's used the sword a few times and is starting to like how it feels in her hands. They teleport back to the castle and find 2 guards dead on the floor, looking like they got roasted. Standing behind them is a priest named Cardinal Greril, and they're both wondering what he's doing there. Shin checks out the guy's stats screen and sees he's been hit with charm and confusion. Gadras gets ready to stop Cardinal Greril, but then Shin and Lady Ryo suddenly teleport away. Unfortunately, Shin and Ryo land in a creepy, half-finished place. Shin's like, "Where are we?" And Lady Ryo realizes they're in the land, Kalkia. It looks like the set of a horror movie. They seem to be all alone here. Ryo wonders what could make a priest as powerful as Cardinal Greril go crazy. Shin thinks they need to book it out of there, so he asks if she can use telepathy, but she says no since she's not in a party with anyone. So Shin decides to reach out to his friends, Shni and Tira, to let them know where to meet. He asks her about any nearby cities, and she mentions Valmer, the only city you pass to get in or out of Bayrelict. Luckily, Shni's call comes in right at the moment, and she's worriedly asking if Shin is okay. He reassures her, saying he's fine. She's scared he might ditch them again since he vanished so suddenly, so he explains what's going on, and they think someone's controlling Cardinal Greril. Shni mentions that using mind-affecting skills is taboo. Even royals get executed for that. If that's true, someone is definitely lurking around. Shin says he can teleport out but doubts Ryo and her crew will let him bounce using lost magic. He asks Shni if she can hold down the fort while he's gone, and she confirms she's got it. He tells her to let them meet up at Valmer. Shni tells Tira that Shin's alright and says they need to head to the palace for some urgent business. On their way to the palace, Shni lets Tira know that Shin got into some trouble with a demon, a monster born from miasma. She describes them as total scumbags who love making people suffer, and the main difference is they get supercharged by miasma. They can even disguise themselves as other monsters. She explains that the more human-like a demon is, the tougher and smarter it is, and they're ranked by that. So it's likely they're dealing with a relatively intelligent demon around Count class level, probably between 300 to 400, since this one could control a guy. Tira starts freaking out, feeling she's not ready to face something that strong. Shni reassures her they're just there to observe, so she doesn't need to be scared. When they find a secure spot near the castle, Shni casts hiding, a concealment spell, so nobody can see them. Then she grabs Tira and tells her to hold on tight because they're taking a quick flight. They leap over a tall fence and sneak into the castle, and Tira is freaking out that they're being this bold, even with their hiding magic on. They head straight for the dungeon where the demon is being held. At the entrance, they run into 2 guards, and Shni puts them to sleep with some sleep magic. After snagging the key from them, they reveal themselves to Cardinal Greril, who's totally shocked to see her and asks what she's doing there. She fills him in on what she's heard, but sadly, Cardinal Greril can't remember anything thanks to a mind-affecting skill. No matter how hard he tries, all he can think of are just bits and pieces. Shni pieces it together. It's because he's dealing with 2 mind effects at once. She calms him down, telling him the 2 guys who got teleported are safe. Then she busts the spell on him, forcing the demon out. And guess what? It's a multi-eyed demon with regenerating hands called Magnamuk, level 423. Shni can tell he's got some brains since he has a proper name. The nasty demon recognizes her as the blue-eyed, silver-haired high elf who's always messing with their plans. She mentions it's been 500 years since she faced one of these demons last time was during the cataclysm. The demon tries to claw at her with his regenerating hands, but Shni slices him up every time with her sword. Then he asks her why she's so determined to protect Cardinal Greril. She responds that it'd be a waste to let him die over unfounded charges. Plus, she says it'd be shameful for the Moon Sanctum if she lets him run free. The dumb demon knows that the Moon Sanctum is where the high humans used to hang out, and they've taken down a bunch of his kind. But then, this gross demon tries to recruit Shni, and she's like, "Nah, I'm good." He asks why she's so bent on disrespecting them and siding with a master who ditched her. He wonders why she doesn't feel angry or bitter about being abandoned and having to rely on her power. Shni is over it. She's tired of him yapping, especially since he's picked a terrible time to try to get under her skin. She whips out her blue moon sword and gives him a promotion to a new level of detachment. It's his head rolling off while he's mumbling some nonsense as his body crumbles. Shni struts out of the dungeon with Cardinal Greril, along with Tira, Shimmer, and Yuzuha. They race right over to the king's palace. Everyone's buzzing about how she got into the castle. The king pops the question, what's she doing in the castle, and how did she access the dungeon? She tells him about the demons in Greril's mind, affecting curse. The king realizes the historical enemies of humanity, the demons, are back in action. He, the queen, and Gadras breathe a sigh of relief when Shni informs them that the 2 teleported folks are okay. The king says he hopes Cardinal Greril can continue as their link to the church, apologizing and promising to work harder. Schnee advises the king to keep a lid on any info about chaos in the castle, or it might freak out the general public. He agrees and asks what her next move is. She says she's got somewhere to be, and leaves the palace with her crew. Tira is curious about how they'll get to the walled city of Valmer, since Shin has their wagon. She asks Schnee about it. Schnee reassures her, saying they'll just run there. Then, she and Tira dash out of the castle toward the walled city of Valmer. Tira keeps screaming as Schnee picks up the pace, even while sitting on Shimmer's back. Meanwhile, good for nothing, Shin turns to Ryo, asking what she knows about the Pure Lands. Ryo explains that the Pure Lands are cities that fell during the Disc of Prosperity event, rumored to require some chosen ones to tackle the monsters popping up there. Clueless Shin points out that they'll need weapons, and Ryo happily shares that she's lucky to have been teleported with the box Skullface sword. Ryo then asks oblivious Shin what weapon he plans to use. Proud Shin gives a goofy smile with his eyes closed, like a puppy scratching an itch, thinking he shouldn't spill the beans on his true powers just yet. He admits that even for him, it's gonna be tough to find their way out of the Pure Land. The two lost duffers meander through the Pure Land, while Ryo tells a tale about a little door rumored to be the exit to a new gate. Shin suggests they look for the door instead of wandering around battling monsters in the Pure Land. Clueless Shin spots a wall and asks Ryo if she's up for climbing it. Without waiting for her answer, he surprisingly jumps into the air and then plops back down to the ground slowly. Braindead Shin tries leaping over the wall again, but with the same result. He asks Ryo what she sees from his jump, and she tells him that after he jumped, he vanished, then reappeared on the ground. Shin suspects teleportation is causing this before trying to jump over a lower part of the fence. Shin claims he knows what's causing the disturbance. He leads Ryo deeper into the Pure Land until they stumble upon a magical light ball. Grinning in realization, Shin tells Ryo that the light means the whole city is a dungeon. Ryo's jaw drops. She's never heard of a city turning into a dungeon before. Shin explains that this city-turned-dungeon works a bit differently from the usual dungeons she knows about. They can only escape by following a specific route. Ryo smartly points out that the reason Shin can't fly over the fence or take the easy way out is that the route sends stray participants back to where they started. With a stupid grin plastered on his face, Shin adds that they've got to follow the magic light balls, dodge traps, and defeat monsters to get out. Ryo smiles at her not-so-useless partner, and thanks him for being her teleported buddy. Shin returns the gratitude, and Ryo blushes like a goof. Before taking charge, Ryo tells Shin to let her know if he spots anything weird. Shin announces that the magic light ball will teleport them to a new location, so he volunteers to go first and will return to report back after checking it out. Shin touches the magic light ball, teleports out, and comes back quickly as promised. He tells Ryo that the new area is safe and not too far away. Ryo apologizes for making Shin be the test subject, and he reassures her that he went willingly because he knows he can handle whatever's waiting on the other side. He grins his usual useless grin while thinking he could easily take down any monster in this game if no one's watching. Ryo promises to repay Shin for his help, and the two aimless idiots teleport through the magic light ball. As Shin scans the area, he warns that there's a monster lurking close by. They take off to confront it, and Ryo asks Shin what the ugly monster is. He explains that it's a ghost-type creature called a Gilly-Ways that uses earth and wind magic. Shin warns her that its movements are all over the place and super unpredictable. The Gilly leaps into the air and whips up a dust tornado to take out its attackers. Ryo can't help but rave about how awesome the monsters of the Pure Land are. Shin reassures the princess that he's got the monster's magic covered. All she needs to do is land a hit on that Gilly. With a slick zigzag slash, he brings the monster down, and Ryo jumps in screaming, slicing it in half. Shin, all smirks, delivers the final blow. Ryo's all smiles, asking how they pulled off the defeat in just 3 moves. Shin tells her that the skill-face sword she's got is made of light magic, which is a weak spot for some monsters. Ryo eagerly asks about his weapon, and Shin reveals his sword's name, Kakura. After a little teasing about Shin's secret power sword, Ryo asks Shin how many monsters his magic vibe can sense, and he tells her he can detect 20. But usually, monsters don't leave their lairs in the dungeon, so they should stay sharp. As they pass through another glowing magic ball, they encounter a high-level slime monster. Ryo totally underestimates Shin's warnings, and she launches herself skyward, swinging her sword. But the slime dodges and traps her with its goo. The slime starts melting her clothes, so Shin rushes in to destroy it. With a clueless expression, he starts chatting about teaming up against the slime. Ryo smirks, noting how casual he's gotten with her since they first met. Caught off guard, Shin avoids her gaze and awkwardly points out that a good chunk of her clothes is gone thanks to the slime. Ryo squeals and hides. Shin offers her his jacket, shivering a bit from the cold. Ryo remarks on how he has a ton of clothes, and Shin nervously explains that most were gifts along with the tools. As they patrol, Shin asks if Ryo can use magic, but she points out they hardly ever fight with it. Shin shares his plan to teach her a spell, and after the lessons, they wander around and find an egg-shaped monster. Shin notes, it feels like the dungeon is trying to purge them. The egg hatches, and boom, a massive griffin monster bursts out, shooting freezing energy everywhere. Without missing a beat, Shin scoops Ryone up and flies out just in time before the blast hits. Once they're safe, Ryone asks to be set down and wonders what they can do next. Shin tells her to hit from behind while he distracts the monster. Ryon grins, teasing if her silly partner can handle the job. Shin assures her he doubts the monster will hit him, and if it does, he's tough enough to take it. He takes off, drawing the monster's attention and throwing finger blades at it. While the beast roars, Ryon spots an opening, jumping up to attack repeatedly, but the griffin smacks her with its wing, and she's shocked at its strength. Shin calls out to her to look up, and as she watches him, she asks if they've taken it down. Shin grins, insisting the griffin monster is gone, but then, surprise, the monster regenerates completely. It wails into the sky, slamming them with ice-cold breath, and they bolt for their lives. Ryon asks Shin how to actually take this thing down. Shin thinks hard, then asks her for a favor. When he tells her to find the gate-opening device herself, Ryon's shocked, but Shin ignores her, saying he'll buy her time while she finds the mechanism. Ryon wants to know why she's messing with that, and Shin explains the monster's fast regeneration likely comes from a spell, and that there's probably something linked to the opening mechanism. Ryon realizes opening the gate could give them a chance to immobilize the griffin, allowing for a getaway. With a silly grin, Shin jokes that monsters love putting on shows. Then, soaring into the air, he apologizes to Ryon and confesses that he's gonna unleash his max power, spell or no spell. And with Ryon out of the way, he unleashes a powerful slash that annihilates the monster. The griffin's head regenerates, and Shin cheerfully declares he'll use it as a lab rat to test his power. After taking down the regenerated monster for the 30th time, Shin decides to try something new. A white sphere appears in the monster's chest. Pulling Shin in, he hurls a fire attack, but the sphere absorbs it, wrapping him in golden light, letting him break free from the monster's grip. Shin hits the dumb giant and notices it can't regenerate. He slashes the monster's neck, watching it vanish into thin air. Ryon strolls over, asking what just exploded and where the griffin went. Shin tells her he wiped it out while she was gone. Outside the dungeon, Shin informs Ryon they need to meet up with a friend in the next town. Schnee gets a message from Shin saying he'll be camping out with the princess for the night, so she tells Tira and the mythical creatures to get moving. At night, by the campfire, Shin volunteers for the first watch and pours Ryon some tea. Ryon quips how he's so prepared for their night out, as if he planned it. Shin explains he used to travel with a magic item box. Ryon admires him and inches closer, trying to annoy him into joining the army, but Shin says no way. She points out it feels great to finally chat with someone who speaks their mind. Shin asks if she has a good relationship with her family, but Ryon admits it's not so great. Shin mentions he's always free to chat, and it's then he notices Ryon has snuggled up against him. The next morning, a battalion of Skull faces heads toward the next town where they're supposed to meet Schnee and the others. Ryon wonders why a huge wave of monsters is rolling toward Valmer. She explains that the monsters' movements resemble a flood. Shin's confused, asking what a flood is. Ryon explains that a flood happens when magic spills over from the Pure Land, gathers enough force, and releases a ton of monsters. Plus, the Mist Garuda protects the area around the Pure Land, and Valmer is the only way to avoid getting caught in it. She goes on to say that Valmer is fortified to act as a last line of defense against those magic floods, but when it faces a serious flood, it typically suffers significant casualties. Ryon glares at the situation, saying Valmer might not withstand the next onslaught. Shin, like a total idiot, tells himself he needs to ask Schnee to hurry to Valmer. Then he cluelessly points out it'll take a while for the monsters to reach Valmer and tells Ryon they need to team up with the Valmer army. At Valmer, Ryon asks Shin how long it'll take for that huge horde of monsters to hit the town. Shin drops the bomb that it'll only take a few days. Ryon decides she needs to meet up with the local lord and tells Shin to check in at the Adventurers Guild. Classic Shin, clueless as ever, asks what's gonna happen next. Ryon explains that the guild and army are going to be super important to fend off this massive invasion, and that the chosen ones will be gathering up. So, at the guild, our boy nincompoop Shin meets up with the guildmaster and spills the tea about the flood of monsters heading toward Valmer. The guildmaster's like, "Hold up, are you saying you've actually seen these monsters?" And Shin answers that he witnessed a ton of nasty creatures moving in from the Pure Land. If it's true, the guildmaster says they gotta start prepping as soon as possible. To back himself up, Shin whips out his Moon Sanctum intro card to show he's serious. He suggests the guildmaster check with the local lord if he still doubts him, since Ryon is already with the lord. The guildmaster assures Shin he trusts him and announces they're going into emergency mode. He also adds that if Ryone's talking with the lord, the army will spring into action. They're planning to start evacuating the townspeople as soon as they get the word. He snaps at his assistant to contact every guild rep. Once she's out, the guildmaster asks Shin what he wants to do. Dumb Shin, in all his heroics, volunteers to stick around and help defend the town. The guildmaster thanks him, but points out they're low on weapons. Shin starts daydreaming about a signboard around town. Just then, Schnee hits him up to let him know she's almost at Valmer. He tells her to let the guildmaster know she's down to join the fight against the Flood. Then, he asks Schnee about that signboard he was zoning out on, but she's clueless. Suddenly, he bumps into a short blonde elf, Beret, who totally recognizes him and fangirls over meeting Shin. Shin can't believe he's meeting a friend side character from the game. Sipping tea at a cafe, Beret asks if Shin's planning to join Valmer's army to fight the Flood. Slowpoke Shin confirms he is, mentioning he just spoke to the guildmaster. Beret is like, dude, why didn't you just wipe out the Flood right away? And Shin explains it's cause he was with the second princess of Bayrelict and couldn't go all out in front of her. Beret grins, teasing that he can totally see a princess proposing to Shin. Shin laughs, admitting the second princess is actually into him, which is why he's trying not to use his full strength. Beret offers to help him whenever he needs it, but Shin suddenly remembers something. He awkwardly asks about that signboard again, and Beret tells him it belongs to his old buddy Hibinako. Shin's mind is blown. Hibineko's still in the game world. Beret names a few friends of Shin's in Valmer, saying they're out of the city on errands but doing fine. Shin thought they were toast from the death game. Beret asks him not to freak out and pulls out a list of players in the game world. When Shin sees the list, he realizes every name on it is connected to him. Beret hands him another list, this one detailing known player killers. Shin's heart sinks as he remembers how those killers wiped out so many of his friends during the death game. Beret explains that when players first popped up in their world, Schnee insisted they hunt down player killers right away. Shin admits Schnee never spilled the tea about other players. Beret calls her lack of mentioned betrayal. Shin laughs off the hypocrisy, and Beret points out that side characters shouldn't keep critical info from their masters. He mentions that although Schnee is his follower, she deserves a slap on the wrist for not keeping him in the loop. Shin stands by Schnee, saying she'd never betray him, but then flashes back to her acting clueless about the signboard. Beret goes back on his previous comment, saying with Schnee's personality, she wouldn't try to hurt Shin by hiding anything. Too bad the seed of distrust is already planted. Shin says out loud that Schnee would never betray him. Just then, Beret has to start prepping for the Flood. When Shin asks if Beret's fighting with the army, he denies it, saying Valmer's safe as long as Shin's around. While strolling through town, Shin tells Schnee that after doing some digging on Floods, he found out a major power player has shown up among the lower-level hordes a few times. The bigger the Flood, the more likely that jerk shows up. Out of nowhere, Yuzuha gives Shin a hug, and he asks Tira where Schnee is. The next day, Tira asks where Shin's off to, and he explains he needs to see the Chosen Ones at the Lord's castle. He notes that Schnee came back late last night, so he didn't get to ask her about those player killers or any other players lurking around. He recalls Beret calling Schnee a traitor. The Lord of Valmer welcomes Shin and introduces him to his board of officials. The Lord outlines their battle plans, and Tira feels bad for the knights under Schnee. After waiting for the monsters, surprise, none show up. The gang regroups to discuss what's going on. Schnee mentions she's seen floods that do a vanishing act like this before, and adds that after disappearing, the monsters suddenly pop up and attack the town. Shin's like, this sounds like an event from the game. Schnee's eyes widen as she says there's a chance a powerful individual is leading this huge flood, aka the event boss. On their way to the Moon Sanctum, Shin asks Schnee if she used massive spells in guild battles while he was gone. She says nah, she can manage most things with her standard area of effect spells. Once at the Moon Sanctum, Shin crafts a giant bow for Tira. As the troops and everyone stand by for the flood, Schnee says there's something she wants to talk about after the battle. Monsters start heading toward Valmer, and Schnee unleashes a massive blue magic attack on them. Tira and Yuzuha are hyped for Schnee, and Ryo gives the order for the troops to attack. Shin points out, this flood isn't your run-of-the-mill monster swarm, and asks Schnee to fire off her blue light spell again, but she uses the servant-master connection to tell Shin she can't keep pulling off big area attacks like that. Shin leaps into the air, wielding his fiery sword, incinerating the surrounding monsters. Before Ryo can lead the charge against the creatures, Tira takes a shot, hitting right in the middle of the horde, causing a huge explosion. Ryo smirks at Tira's excitement and dives into the fray. Suddenly, a massive monster comes at Ryo, and when Tira tries to help, she stumbles, saying she drained a ton of mana with that last attack. Yuzuha tries to talk Tira out of shooting again, but Tira insists she needs to help Ryo. Just in the nick of time, Wilhelm swoops in to save Ryo. Tira recognizes him, and Lachia pops up behind her, offering to refill her mana. Ryo and Wilhelm team up to take down the giant monster. Ryo thanks Wilhelm for saving her, and asks why he's in Valmer. Wilhelm explains that the guild sent out a request for help. He flashes back to Marie, begging him to save Shin from the monsters and grins. Shin's rocking some full-body armor and just slams a monster down like it's nothing. The guards around him are like, "Who are you?" He tells them to call him Red and suggests they get lost so he can cut loose with his powers. The guards skedaddle in fear, and Shin activates his cursed axe, and he slices through a massive horde of monsters like a hot knife through butter and spots the big boss. This demon tries to drop a mind-numbing spell on the soldiers, but Shin's not having it. He cranks up his attributes limit, jumps into the air, and obliterates the demon with one epic smash of his axe. Meanwhile, Schnee, being a bit clueless, tells her dim-witted master that all the monsters are gone, and the town's buzzing about 0 casualties. Wilhelm and Lachia dip out after the battle, but Shin and his crew have to stick around for a victory party. At the bash, Ryon calls for Shin, and Schnee, being all curious, asks her master if anything went down between him and Ryon. Shin immediately denies it and gets all nervous around Ryon. Schnee, feeling a twinge of jealousy, storms off. Classic drama. Shin meets up with Schnee later. She apologizes for bailing on him, and he wants to know if she's feeling jealous. She admits she totally is. Then she asks if Barrett told him about the players and the player killers, and he nods. Schnee starts freaking out, saying she's sorry for not telling him sooner because she thought he might go back to being the old Shin if he found out. She breaks down in tears, saying she doesn't know how to be her old self anymore. She confesses she wants to be Shin's rock, and he pulls her in for a surprise hug, telling her he would have reacted the same way if roles were reversed. Shin opens up about feeling super lonely after defeating the game boss and returning until they got reunited, and he realized Schnee remembered him. He promises not to punish her and asks her to never keep secrets from him again, but then Schnee flips the script and asks if he's still in love with Mariano, and he admits he is. She brushes off his answer and kisses him, looking him in the eyes, saying she won't stop loving him even if he heads back to his world. Then Schnee heads back to the party, and the little squad enjoys the rest of their night with a bang. The next morning, Shin and the girls bounce from Valmer to hit up the next town.